Hey y'all. So this video on Map 8 is coming out a fair bit after some others, but I wanted to get all of day 2 under my belt before making this to see how much of my initial impressions could be fixed, improved, whatever, by changing my team and my tactics a little bit for day 2. And it did help a little bit, but I honestly still have just a ton of problems. One of the things that you'll notice right here is just that the AI is so passive. I think this is the biggest complaint for everybody. Like, look at that. She's running in, that's 3, 4, 5. I mean, that one is also like the issues with Dex, where the parry was accidental. Hit into her block, she dashes in, now we're up to 6, and now she throws her special too. Like, that was just like 30, 40 seconds wasted just on baiting a single special, and now we're right back up. And this is kind of the Map 8 experience in a nutshell right here, is that when you play everything the way that you're supposed to, ultimately you still end up spending a whole ton of time praying for your opponents to throw their specials or to finally give you an opening to land the heavy you need to land to do full damage, etc., etc. It's a very frustrating experience because Kabam set up all of these fights, like pretty much all of them have some kind of damage reduction where you need to do a thing to get around it. And then when you do that thing, you have a narrow window to really make progress in the fight. But that narrow window is often used up by the AI just dawdling around and doing nothing. And this is particularly a problem on some of the bosses, and I will get to that later, but it's just, I don't know what they were thinking with this AI, because Kabam, like, we know they have different AI profiles. Like, War does not behave the same as Arena, does not behave the same as, like, Act 1 opponents. We all know this. Which means that the fact that this feels different than Map 7 is an intentional change that they apparently thought would make things more interesting. And it just feels like by far the biggest failure. Now, another thing is these crossfights that they gave us, only applying to one champion, feels like a huge missed opportunity. I really do not understand why they didn't take the Cavalier EQ approach and just make build the trade-offs into the nodes themselves. Because right here you'll see this Spider Gwen is on the same path as the Elsa I just took, but using Massacre for this fight would be kind of crazy because she would be evading all over the place, and using Venom Pool for this whole lane instead of Massacre for those first few would mean that I'm literally only using Venom Pool for all 3 of my lanes. And that's, a different kind of problem. So, like, they tell you to bring 3 champions and try and, like, switch it up so that you have answers to these diverse challenges. But then, by their own admission in throwing in these crossfights, they know that some of these challenges require specific help, and then they force you to only give that to one champion. There's also the fact that some of these crossfights seem to be a little bit bugged. You'll see right there that the crossfight that's currently on Venom Pool for this is supposed to make his buffs last longer, but the description says it gives vigilance charges. I don't know. So now we're into the buffed up lanes, and this is getting into another one of my critiques, which is just that some of the champions they picked here do not have enough buffs. Like, it's easy enough for you to bring champions so that you always have buffs on yourself. That part of it is not difficult. AI caught me there. But keeping buffs on the opponent is sometimes extremely annoying. I'm using Odin instead of Venom Pool here because Venom Pool relies a ton on his bleed damage, which doesn't work on Groot, and I came close to timing out on day 1. So on day 2, I dropped the healing synergy that I had been bringing for Venom Pool and decided to bring Odin instead to trade off. Now, what that means is that Odin does not get the crossfight, at least for my section 2. I believe I ended up giving it to him for section 3, so then they both had a bit of it. But that just feeds into the problem we were talking about. You give one champion the crossfight, and that means that if you have to switch off with another, it doesn't do anything. So Odin is doing fine, but basically, whenever Groot runs out of buffs, if I haven't triggered new ones, then the fight just comes to a grinding halt. Like, look at that. On day 2, I'm definitely finding enough openings, but if I had worse crit luck and he wasn't proccing as many buffs, on day 4 or 5, this could be a serious issue. I think, yeah, this is a miscalculation on my part, but notice how I throw that special 2, and the buffs expire right before it lands to finish the fight. That's something of a theme with these. Now, I'm skipping over Odin himself as a defender because that's one of the easiest fights on the whole path. He's not bleed immune. He starts with 3 buffs. As long as you don't nullify them, there's nothing to it. But look at this Venom Pool, because Venom Pool starts with 0 buffs. My Venom Pool, I got around that by using the Odin pre-fights on him. Although actually in the previous fight, one of them failed and he started with 2 buffs instead of 3, which, yeah, Kabam's performance with pre-fights we can just put over there. But we had to land 10 hits before he even got 1. And let's see how long before we get 2. So we are 30 seconds into the fight, and we have just gotten him to 2 buffs. Now here I actually make a mistake. I think what I should have done is just be a little aggressive, pushed him to the special 2, allowed him to copy them, and then at about the 40-second mark, I could have started doing damage. That's on my bad, or that's on me. Because I didn't do that, I had to wait until now. Now, at the about 50-second mark, I can start doing damage. But even so, like, the fact that you have to wait so long, no matter who you use almost, it's just so frustrating. Like, you could use... People have mentioned Man-Thing and Dr. Voodoo, but both of those are probably going to require Odin pre-fights to, reliably be outputting damage. For Voodoo to keep the buffs up, you're probably going to have to... Like, if you don't use Odin, you're going to have to stick to his special too. But that means that you're going to be burning through the buffs on the opponent that you placed there to make the fight easier, which was the whole reason you brought Voodoo. And he just doesn't have a ton of damage if you're not nullifying things to inflict those poisons. Plus, almost nobody has a 6-star Dr. Voodoo. I'm getting through these lanes, but I think they were a little too restrictive in their design. Like, this Surfer is absolutely maddening, because getting him to keep 3 buffs on himself is... It's just so AI dependent. Like, you'll see a couple times in here where I get him up to 2 buffs, and then what I should do is I should knock him down to give him the cruelty. That's one thing they did correctly, is throw that note on, but even that has a serious drawback, and that it allows them to crit through block, and all of them have incredibly high attack values. It's frustrating. Yeah, so here I should have thrown like a heavy or something to knock him down, but I can't throw the special 1 because that would nullify something, and then we're, back to square 1. The other problem with this particular fight is that because he threw that heavy there, he just got 1 of the same buff back, and now even if I throw a heavy and knock him down, he'll only be at 2. See, this Surfer just kept throwing power gains, so he wasn't refreshing his older power gains, he wasn't gaining Furies, he wasn't gaining Armors. As I've said, I could have played this a little bit better, but you can see how, thanks to largely the AI, we are just now starting to do damage a full minute in. Thankfully, he is throwing his specials, unlike some of the other champions I've run into. But this all kind of speaks to the problem that people are having. A lot of the node designs, like I said, give you windows for where you can do damage. And then you jump through the hoops, and the windows are just not big enough when you take into account the AI. Now, another big problem is that I think the crossfights themselves just don't do enough. Like on this one, it makes buffs activated during specials last longer. But as I said, having buffs on yourself is not the hard part of these lanes. The problem is having buffs on the opponent. And so I would rather the crossfight be something along the lines of when you throw a heavy or something. Like, have it put that same cruelty on them such that, now they can crit through block. That's a real drawback. But then tie that to a bigger benefit than a single short buff. Make it so that, like, I don't know, for 10 seconds after you throw a heavy, then your champion has a chance to apply like a placebo buff on hit. That would be huge. For some of the other lanes, like there's the one where the opponent goes unblockable, and then if you jump through some hoops, you can block a single unblockable attack. But most of the opponents that Kabam put on those paths have like 5 hit specials that are difficult to dex that will then be unblockable. That path is actually one of the easier ones since the unblockable is an active buff that you can deal with, but there are just so many things along here that I don't think the crossfights are enough. I think the way that they built the fights, if they want people to play into them, there needs to be more of a reward to playing into them. Fighting dirty seems to be one of the worst, the ones where if they are not shocked after their special attacks, you then they go unblockable for a while. But the problem is most shock champions, especially the ones people have ranked up, have like 3 or 4 second shocks. The crossfight is not enough for this because it only deals with another part, so you're basically intercepting the whole fight. I think that crossfight should instead be something along the lines of, if you are using a champion with the crossfight, maybe it only works for certain champions, but make it so that like shocks are paused during both champions' special attacks. That would be huge, because then the opponent uses their special attack, and as long as you have them shocked at the beginning, then the thing that you are trying to do, that you brought a champion specifically to do, to turn off the unblockable, would actually work. I haven't looked deeply into a lot of the lanes yet, but that's the general feedback I've gotten, is that a lot of the crossfights only applying to one champion is a pain, because most of the lanes have something in them that messes with options. Like there's that Spider Gwen on my first lane that messes with a lot of champions that could take polka dot power. There's like the Groot that messes with a lot of cosmics that might do bleed damage. There's a Colossus in tier 2 that messes with cosmics that might do incinerate damage. Like, they built the lanes to ask for more than one champion, so the crossfights only applying to one is frustrating. But then the crossfights also need to be better. So I've been showing this Penny Parker fight in the background. Here I make a pretty big mistake. I forgot that I was going to be unblockable, and so I just push a red. Not great. I did finally get some damage in on her, but this fight was another one where all that talk about windows and the AI was really getting to me. Like, I know it's possible for Venompool to solo that fight. I need to play better. But at the same time, it's extremely frustrating that, like, you put Conflictor on cooldown by parrying, she goes defensive and waits it out. You take her stun shield off, and that goes into cooldown. She goes defensive and waits it out. You knock her down to get rid of the protection so you can do some real damage. She goes defensive and waits it out. And the fact that with a lot of champions that are particularly good for Penny, you need to knock her down and turn off Conflictor to do anything. And of course, you need the sync shield down to reliably knock her down. So you basically need all three things to be in cooldown at the same time, unless you are using an option that cheeses it a little bit. Like my friend Slay used Magneto yesterday and soloed. It's just extremely frustrating design. Like, if you try to play into what Kabam has put in front of you and play the node, you have a worse time than just using, frankly, overpowered options to bypass everything. And that seems to be something of a theme lately. Those of you who either have seen or tried Variant 8 have heard about the Venom Pool boss, where when it first was released, actually trying to play the node and use the champions that you were supposed to use in the quest, it was functionally unbeatable. But then if you use cheese options that you weren't supposed to bring in the quest, then sure, it was an easy fight. And that just speaks to bad design. That speaks to Kabam having good ideas about the experience that they want us to have, putting in nodes to try and push in the direction of those experiences, and then not bothering to test it properly to see if the gameplay is what they had in mind. And I feel like that's just all over Map 8. There are a lot of really good ideas here. I want to give credit where credit is due. There are a lot of things where you can tell what they were going for. There was this interplay, this is how you were supposed to answer it. You just, you play into it and you actually have a more interesting experience than what Map 7 was. AQ feels a little more mindless. You come out the other side hating life a little bit less. Except they didn't follow through. They didn't make sure that was actually what was happening. And so instead you have this passive AI where you are fighting like mad to fit things into these windows. And the result is that I know a lot of really good players timing out with rank 3 6 stars that do answer their paths on day 1 and 2. That is stupid. Because yeah, maybe they could rank up the one option that cheeses their path and do better going forward. But that just speaks to a failure in design for Alliance Quest on its own. These paths should have more than one option, and when you use the second option that does all the things to check the boxes and the nodes, that jumps through the hoops, you shouldn't have to deal with timing out. Because the thing is that if you time out, not only does it make AQ more of a grind, it makes it a worse experience, but now you have to use resources to make sure you have enough health to get through, because most of these lanes do not allow you to bring healers. And I saw somebody say, and this is not a shot against them, but they said, well, we haven't really had to use resources on map 7 in a while, so maybe this isn't a bad thing. And my response to them is, okay, but those resources have gotten worse and worse over the years. We're still dealing with potions that barely make a dent in the rank 3 6 stars that most of us are using for high-end AQ these days. They haven't gotten cheaper. They haven't gotten better. We just need more of them, and we still have that same 15 item cap. So now you have people timing out, burning through their glory, which is supposed to be used to advance their account, or using units, which would also advance their account, so that they don't item out in AQ, so that they don't let their alliance down because they're running map 8 to advance their account. The feedback loop is broken right now. I get what Kabam was going for with this, but the current state of the design, the crux of it being the fact that there's just damage reduction and passive AI all over the place. The current design, the crappy quality of resources currently available, and the timers and AI interacting with all of it, the compounding effect is something that could have been very cool and could have been a massive quality of life improvement. Because remember, they built this so that we had more backup available, so that AQ was supposed to be more flexible at the beginning and at the end, so we could get through it more easily with less stress. They did try, but they didn't follow through, and the total effect of this is just, in my opinion, actually a step backwards in terms of quality of life. We're doing okay right now, but day 4 and day 5 are going to be a problem. And the thing is that while I want the timers to be extended, I also want the nodes to be looked at. I also want resources to be improved. Because if the nodes aren't looked at, if the AI isn't improved, then sure, maybe we have 5 minutes to do all of these fights, but then maybe we need 5 minutes to do all of these fights. And then a year ago, all of our IQ fights were taking somewhere in between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. I'm leaving out Corvus. It's it's not realistic to expect AQ fights to take 20 or 30 seconds every time. So the rest of us were maybe taking 90 seconds or 2 minutes. And now the new normal would be us taking 3, 4, almost 5 minutes for something that we need to do 5 times every 8 days. Again, that's not a quality of life improvement. So overall, I get where Kabam was going with this. There are a lot of positive indications in the design, but they need to improve it. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed, and I'm not happy with it. We already lost one Alliance member over this, and I don't want to lose more, and I don't want us to hate logging in for AQ. That has long been one of the biggest complaints about playing this game at a high level for everyone. Is that, oh, well, AQ's back. That sucks. I was really enjoying the 3 days off. I really look forward to a time when it doesn't feel like that. I think Kabam is looking forward to a time when it doesn't feel like that too. And I hope that this feedback from me and from all of the other content creators out there, all of the other officers out there, because I know they're getting a lot of feedback, I hope they take it into account and end up delivering a better product. I really do have hope, but this ain't it. See y'all later. Take care.